Hello again. All right. So I'm going to start this. Taxes are good for society.
Okay.
I want to start with a baseline. Do you agree that for at least some part of our society, we'll label it, say, the bottom 10th or the bottom 1%, however low that you want to go, that taxes are beneficial for our society, that there are individuals, either they're whatever their circumstances might be, where through taxes they are provided a standard of living that they would not otherwise get?
No.
So you don't. Okay.
Well, so I would take. Have you heard the water purity example?
Go ahead. I probably
Okay.
have
So
heard it, but
well, so basically the question is, and I think this sort of touches on economics about diminishing marginal utility. So take society for example. The government can provide us, let's say, with water purity at 97%, and let's say it could do it very cheaply, right? But then let's say you wanted to give society 100% pure water, right? Cover everybody and give them the best water possible. The cost to do that would be prohibitively, I can't talk today. It'd be really expensive, basically, right? Because to give 100% pure water means that you have to rip up all plumbing in the city or in the state. You'd have to have a whole new, brand new, state-of-the-art water treatment facility. You'd need a bunch of new employees. You need more quality control. And so basically, to get from 97% to 100% means that the cost to do it is greater than the benefits, right? And so I would apply that to taxes, because basically what you're saying is, it seems like for you the most important thing is 100% coverage. And for me, I think in economics, there's always trade-offs. There's no solutions. So for me, I'm happy with 97%. And 97% means that there's going to be competition. It's not government run, meaning the price will naturally go down. It'll be affordable. And so I'm okay with that. But it seems like for you absolutely want that 100%. And I think that what you're not seeing is the cost to do that and the mechanisms involved, meaning the government has to go and basically force people to pay in order to have this 100% coverage. But I think what you're left with is something that's extremely expensive because there's no voluntarism, right? People can't choose to pay it or not, which means the government can basically come up with whatever price it wants. If there's no market competition, there's nothing to compare it with, right? When you have healthcare that's public and private, you can say healthcare is expensive, right? Because we can compare it to the private sector, and you can say, okay, the government can maybe do it cheaper. But when you have something that only government does because we want that 100% coverage, like the police, right? No one's in the streets rioting and saying that police are they're overpaid or it's too expensive and it can be done cheaper. And that's because there's no private version of police, right? I mean, there's bodyguards and stuff, but there's no private police to say, oh, well, here's the market price and here's what the government's doing. So you're basically blindly just supplying something and not knowing if it's even being provided efficiently and affordable. But I'll let you take it from there.
sure. The problem with that, or I guess my pushback on, would be that in a system that has competition like you're describing,
Okay.
you're going to have people that are left out, right? A significant number of people who can't.
Well,
that's just.
I don't know about that. But like I said, I accepted that as one of the cons to my thing of a voluntary system is that 1 or 2% in the worst circumstances won't be able to have it. But even then, there's charity, there's loans, there's and people aren't always at the bottom percentage. People move up in their lifetime. 18-year-olds are obviously poorer than people that have retired, so people move up the income brackets.
And they also move down when life circumstances come in. So my point is, who would advocate and provide for the 2 or 3% that wouldn't be covered under your model? Would they just die, or they just have no access to those services? I mean, who is then responsibility if they're clearly not able to provide the services for themselves? We can agree that given your scenario, they are unable for whatever reason to provide the services themselves in using the market competition. Mm-hmm. So the only option then is that they are not they don't have access to the service at all, so they're denied it. If that service is clean water, if that service is healthcare, if that service is road, who then advocates for them? Whose responsibility is it to protect them if they're not able to do it on their own? It is, in my opinion, and it is a government must step in and provide for those, because they are the only ones who has the responsibility, because those individuals are members of the population, that they are part of the government. So basically, is the government protecting itself when they are certainly not members of the economy that you're describing, or the free market that you're describing? They are not members of it because they are non-participatory. So they are not part of that. Where in the government's position, they are, by the act of being part of one of our countrymen, they make up our country. And so the country has a responsibility to them.
Well, I think this is one of those things that's tricky to, I don't know, understand or maybe follow, or maybe just on the surface, it doesn't seem right. But I guess it's one of those paradoxes in the system where by not providing it to everybody can then have access, right? Because again, you get market mechanisms, you get competition, you get prices that go down. There's no government mandate to make sure everyone has access to a computer. But now 99% of people in America can walk around with a supercomputer in their pocket, right? So while you're saying theoretically, yes, if people can voluntarily buy the services they want, if you don't have the money, yes, you can buy it. But I think that the percentage of people that you're saying would not have services, I think, is much smaller than what you're saying it would be, right? Because again, if there's competition, there's going to be affordability, there's going to be innovation, and there's charity, there's loans, and people move up and down the income brackets. So like I said, so let me just reiterate and say that like I said, I admit that if the government doesn't take money from people to distribute it to everybody, will a certain percentage not have access to certain services? Sure. But that's the con I'm willing to go. That's the trade-off I'm willing to accept. For you, are you willing to accept the trade-off that government's going to get involved? There's going to be no competition. It's going to be extremely expensive, and you're going to have to sacrifice other things, right? Because if you're paying too much for this, that means you get less education, you get less other services, less healthcare, less private sector spending. So I'm willing to have this, and you're willing to have that, basically.
Okay. And so I think what you're saying is true, but I think that you're missing one key aspect of it. With the free market, that doesn't exist with the government, is that you have those, we've talked about those 2 to 3% that have zero access. Now let's talk about the next 3 to 5%, or the next 5 to 10%.
Okay.
The access that they have is of lower quality, minimum quality of whatever service that we're going to provide. So if we're talking about 97% clean water, or if we're talking about access to roads, we're talking about healthcare, the part that the poorest of the poor that have enough income to afford it, they're going to be able to only afford a lower quality product, right? So what the government does is that it sets a minimum product. It says that we have determined, however we determine that every individual has a minimum quality of product that they're going to.
And the key word there is we have determined, right? Politicians have determined.
Well,
not consumers.
Well, see, that's
important to point out.
I think that we just look at it different ways. I think politicians are determined by the same people who are going to be the consumers, or the same people who are going to vote the politicians in. So,
did you vote for Trump?
I did not vote for Trump, no.
Okay. Maybe you should have voted harder.
Well, I accept that in our policy. I mean, I accept that the majority of the people voted for him. So then that speaks for...
The majority didn't vote for him.
Well,
the majority voted for Hillary, right?
This isn't not a political discussion,
sure,
whether or not we like the Electoral College or not. But the idea is that I participated. My side didn't win, but
okay,
we were beat by it worked out. Our system worked. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
if enough people wanted him, then I accept that. In my worldview, that's an acceptable outcome, right?
Okay.
So it's not my desirable outcome, but it's an acceptable outcome. But anyway, when it comes to services, the government through taxation provides a minimum standard care. So say the standard care is I don't know 50-50. We'll just use an arbitrary term like 50. So in your system, it seems to me that you're going to have people who can't afford anything at all. And then you're going to have several people who can afford a less than 50 on the scale. So from 0 to 50, you're going to have people that's the best that they can afford. You're also going to have people that can afford higher quality, or however we're going to define it, up to 100% being the best. So the minimum is the 50 that the government provides everybody, no matter what. In my system, people still have access to people who can afford it still have access from 51 to 100. So, but in your system, the government has determined that the most efficient and that gives everyone the best that they can have of what they need is 50. But you're going to have people in your system who can afford only a 1 or a 2 or a 5 or a 10 or a 40, which is going to be a lower standard of living. So while the government's position has 100% access, and in the free market position, you're going to also have a position where you have some that have 0% access, and then a large number that have significantly lower access to lower quality. So their quality of life is going to be lower. Their minimum quality of life is going to be lower. But you're still going to have the same access is available in each system to the higher qualities, right? So it seems to me by the government is saying that since we have responsibility for all these people, we're setting this minimum quality here, and that's what everyone's going to get. And we're going to provide that to you, whether or not you can afford it or however you're going to get it, if you pay your taxes in, if you don't pay your taxes in. So that means individuals that are below the 50 mark get to 50, and those that are higher, they have access to the 50 if they want it. If they want the higher quality, they can get it. Now, if they somehow are used to getting the higher quality, but then they no longer have the means to get the higher quality, they still have access to the minimum. So their drop from the highest standard that they were down to low is never going to be as steep as in your system, where if an individual loses their job or a company goes under, they may be going from like a 75 to a 0 or 75 to a 1 or 2. So their possible transition is going to be much higher. So that's going to be detrimental. So it just seems that the taxation provides for a more stable system for all important services. And everyone has access to them and has access to the minimum level. So I don't see a benefit. I don't see where your benefit, if you accept that there's going to be a significant number that would fare worse than the government standard.
But it seems like the fatal presumption here is that prices and quality will somehow just be static, right? It'll be like there's the government standard, but then you have the market where it's got all these different quality levels, and they have a certain price associated with them, and then that's it. Which, of course, we know isn't true, right? The market is extremely good at, first of all, figure out what people want, right? Because there's the profit and loss. And so if people are buying, let's say, more mineral water versus pH balanced water versus mountain spring water, right? The market will figure out what people want. And then whatever has the highest profit margin, more producers will go in there and try to compete. And then that will just naturally drive prices down. So I think what you would have is you wouldn't have different quality levels where there's different prices. Well, I mean, obviously you'd have that, but I think what you would have is that the highest quality in the market would probably be near the cost to produce, like something the government was making, right? Or at least the assumption here is that the cost for something high quality will always just be high, which we know is not true, right? There's so many examples of things getting progressively better and cheaper, right? Now you can have 2-day shipping from Amazon for free, right? You can have a smartphone that's more powerful than anything IBM created in the 70s and 80s, right? So we know in the market that quality goes up, prices go down. So why is it seems like your presumption is that there's going to be a certain price for a certain quality, and it's just frozen like that. It's just in a stasis. So why do you have that view?
So I guess I would say that the products that are considered a high quality will be surpassed, because as they become standardized, or as they become closer to the what we would consider like the government minimum, newer techniques are going to come out, or not newer techniques, but newer services or newer products are going to come out that are going to be better than those, that are going to be available only to those high-end individuals. I mean, we see that all the time. We see that as new technologies come out, they're super expensive first. Only a certain echelon of people can afford them. As the price comes down, more people can afford them,
Right.
and that drive. But then, as more people do, the people who've already had them for a while, they want something more. So then you have that next level come out. So it's not that the highest quality then stays the highest quality and then becomes cheaper and easier to produce, and it stays the highest quality. I mean, it's just higher quality becomes mid-range quality, and the lowest quality is just no one produces them anymore, because there's no need to. If the process is already, if you can produce a higher quality product for the same
Right.
with the same manufacturing cost, so the lowest quality that existed at first will no longer be produced. It'll be replaced by what used to be medium, that is now below. So then you have a new top.
It sounds pretty good.
Well, the bad thing is, when you're talking about something like healthcare, you're talking about something like, when you have new things that come out that are only available to certain tiers of the economy, of people,
Right.
or certain tiers of the individuals. That's not. I don't want to say it's not fair. I mean, but it's not fair. It's not in the best interest of the government to have, say, a cure for a certain type of disease only be available for a certain a certain class of individual, or certain economic status.
Well, things aren't just expensive, just randomly, right? It's an indication of scarcity. So either way, whether you have a market system or government system, if something is extremely expensive, that means there's not much of it, and both systems will have to ration. So how would you ration, I guess, in the government system, right? Because if it's the case, the government could just give this, let's say, this cure for HIV, right, or a vaccine for it. Let's say if the case is the government could just give it to everybody. Well, in the same mirror world where there's the market, well, then that would just be really cheap because it's not scarce, right? So the reason it's really expensive is because it's just there's so little of it, right?
See, I don't think that that's necessarily the case.
So
I
you
think
would still ration in the government system. It's just the bureaucrats would get the things first.
it would be you would not have the same. It would not have the same time if a cure for HIV came out.
Okay.
Because of the cost incurred by the state for the treatment of HIV, or any medical, that's such an expensive treatment they're going to be treating. The government would say, okay, now we have a cure.
Okay.
So the government would ensure that cure got given to everyone by doing whatever was necessary, by funding the research and development into that cure. If the cure exists, I mean, especially if the cure exists already, they would mass produce it. But
so why wouldn't the market mass produce it? If the cure for the vaccine for HIV, let's say it's $50,000 and rich people are buying it, why would other entrepreneurs and other pharmaceuticals not like dive into that market and start producing it as well and ramp up production? Why would that also not occur?
Well, because I mean, in the market system, the curing a disease is not the ideal way to treat a disease, right?
No.
I mean, if you're in the
depends on who the supplier or what the business is, right? I mean, obviously, Firestone tires, they want you to buy a tire. You know, if they could have their wish, you'd buy a new tire every day. But if Ford sold a car that where you had to replace the tires every day, well, that's not very conducive to their business, right? So it depends on what perspective you're looking at. If you're an insurance company, you obviously want to pay as little money as possible and have healthy people, right?
Would a car company like Firestone sell tires that you would never have to replace? Would that be beneficial to their market?
No, but then Ford, let's say if there was a tire that could do that, Ford would just go to the supplier that will build that tire and take that into their car and then sell it, right? Because then if there's a Ford with a indestructible tire versus a Toyota with a really shitty tire you got to replace all the time, obviously they can steal market share. So again, it depends on what perspective. The pharmaceuticals, yeah, they would love if you paid for medicine every day, but insurance companies don't want to pay for medicine every day, right? So it depends on what perspective.
But I guess in my system, people have a minimum set of healthcare, so the government's going to be responsible for a large number of those people to get that treatment.
Okay.
So then the government will have focused. If a cure were to come out and it could ease the burden on that treatment, the government would do that, because the government's not motivated by profit. The government is motivated by reducing expense while still protecting people, right?
Well, how would it know to produce more, though, without profit and loss? Because obviously if someone's buying a lot of a product I'm making, I'm going to make more of that product rather than make this other product, right?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about something like a cure to a disease, if you have X number of people that you're treating every single month with a preventative medication or long-term treatment options, and you have access to that information, you say.
But they don't have prices, though. They just know X amount of people are suffering from this, and we need to give it to them. But you could have a lot of people with, the cold, a lot of people with the flu. In other words, how is the government prioritizing this over something else, right? There's a lot of things that could kill you. If you have pneumonia that's untreated, why not make more antibiotics? Why make this rather than that, I guess?
I think they would have to go just where the greatest need is. I mean, if the money was needed, if you're having an outbreak of pneumonia, they would work on vaccinating or treating that. I mean, whatever's the most current dangerous threat to the population.
How do they figure that out? Like a survey or something, or just data?
I mean, just data. I mean, if you have a government insurance and they know how many certain type of medication is used. I mean, you can go on to Tennessee's on their website and say we treated X number of diabetes patients over the past year.
How long does it take to get that data? I mean, to record it all and analyze it. How long do you think that would take?
Well, I mean, it could probably be done. It could probably be done instantaneously as the claims are processed. I'm assuming it doesn't do that. I know they put out a report every year that's a couple of years old. So the latest one I think is 2014, 2015.
So you're saying once a year the government would look at the data, or this thing would spit out, and then based on that they would figure out how to allocate or produce what medicine once a year?
Well, that's not the most efficient system. If it were possible, if you had something come up. Nothing changes as rapidly as that. If you had something come up
without prices, because prices, I could check the price of Bitcoin, and I guarantee you, like every minute, the price of that is updating based on supply and demand. So, do you have something faster than that?
I mean, I don't know that they have something as fast as every minute, but I do know that they would be able to look at if someone came up and said we cured diabetes with this treatment, or we cured HIV with this injection, they could come in and say every person that's they can go to every insurance company that receives government funding and says we want a list of your individuals that were treated for HIV for this past month, and they would be able to give that to them.
Right. And as they're getting that data, right, that data is going to be outdated by the time they actually process it and analyze it. It'll be outdated, right?
I mean, not outdated in the sense that the person's not going to have the disease anymore, so they're going to be able to.
Well, the person may be dead by then, right?
I mean, if they're being treated monthly for it, I mean, it is like there. Are you? I guess you're saying that it's not perfect because it's not instantaneous, but it's still the best way to get the
not perfect, but it's not better than other systems, like I said, through the price system, right? I can figure this out very easily through profit and loss. I can figure out, okay, and I can do it very granularly. I can figure out, okay, are they paying $25 for this or $24 for that, right? And I can also figure out with things that are very similar. Maybe maybe it's the flu versus the cold. Maybe it's, this disease or a mutation of that disease. And very accurately and very quickly, I can figure out what do people want more, right? Because again, in this system of yours where there's a survey, or maybe you have a better system than a survey, but what if you have things that are pretty comparable, right? They're very similar in how deadly they are. How do you figure out, and let's say they have equal amount of patients suffering from it. Again, I don't figure out, I don't know how you figure out which one to make, because you can't make both, obviously, right?
I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't. I mean, you could make both. I mean, that's the benefit of being
without sacrificing, right? So you would we'd make both of these things, but then you'd have to sacrifice and not being able to fund other things. And I'm saying with profit and loss, I can figure out exactly how much of something to produce while also funding other important things that people want.
I don't know that it would be. I don't know you'd be able to do that. I mean, you wouldn't be able to provide the individual who doesn't have the $20,000 to buy the cure, or the $10,000 to buy the cure, or then if it keeps going down in a couple of years to the $5,000 to buy the cure. I mean, you wouldn't be able to provide that.
It's only 20,000 because it's so scarce, right? Because there's so few of it. So again, both systems have to ration, right? It's not like if this is $20,000 in here, the government would somehow be able to magically produce all of it for all of society, right? Things cost a certain amount because of supply and demand. There's so few of it, therefore it's really expensive.
If you have one company that makes it and they're charging $20,000, the government could most certainly go to that company and say, we want X number of doses of this medication. We'll pay $20,000 a piece for them. And they could get that. The government has the resources that no market would be able to have. They could come to that company and say, we want this. It is an effective, given our analysis, this is going to save us money in the long term, even if that long term is 5-10 years down the road. No market is going to be able to compare to that.
Okay, so because the pharmaceutical knows that the government has all this money, right? Like you just said that, I know that, you know that, everyone knows that. So okay, so now the government goes to this place, pays the $20,000. There's no market discipline, meaning okay, now you have this thing, but now you have no cancer medication. You have no X-ray machines now. Now that you spent $20,000 on this cure, right? You're not allocating resources
all those people
efficiently as possible.
But then we're assuming then that all those people are cured, right? And so if they're no longer have the disease and they're able to go back to work, and they become more productive members of society if they're suffering from it.
But I'm saying you sacrifice one thing for the other, right?
See, I don't think
you let the government pay $20,000, and now that pharmaceutical is going to obviously take advantage. Many private companies know the government has money and charge them a lot.
Sure.
So now you spent all this money there, and you can't spend it over here now.
No, because it wouldn't work like that. It would work. The government would come to this company and say, we need X number of doses. We're going to pay you X number of dollars this quarter. We're going to pay you X number of dollars of this quarter. We're going to pay you X number of dollars of this quarter.
Why would they? Well, let's say the pharmaceutical says, okay, let's not do that. And I'll just give you government official. I'll just fund your campaign every year. Why don't we just do that?
Because it wouldn't work like that. I mean,
it works like that today.
That seems cynical.
Deny that there's tremendous corruption in pharmaceuticals and government.
I deny that if there was a significant cure to HIV, that they would be able to fund a single individual, and they would be able to keep the government from getting that cure. That seems overly cynical.
Wait, sorry, run that by me again.
So you're saying like that they would be able to. It would never be better for an individual politician to. I mean.
No, I'm saying
there's not enough money. There's not enough money that you could give an individual politician to keep them from curing for the prestige of curing everyone that has.
I'm not saying that
HIV. Yeah,
I'm saying they would say, okay, we'll make this cure for $20,000, but let's keep it at $20,000 forever. That's what I'm saying. And you're saying that, well, no, the government would go, okay, we're going to pay $20,000 this year and $18,000 that year, and we're going to work on making this price efficient. Or just make it go down and then increase the efficiency of producing it, so the price.
Well, no, see the difference with the government then is if in a situation like that where the company has already created something and already has the means of production. If they refuse, the government will come in and offer to buy it. If they just simply refuse to play, I mean, the government will put pressure on them in order to get them to abide by their rules. I mean, that happens all the time when you have either sanctions or you have deep restrictions, or you have things made towards specific companies. I mean, these are things that the government can use its power in order to
I'm
get
saying
what
they
it
would
wants.
accept that. I'm saying if the government said we want a cure for 20,000, I'm saying the company would accept that, but I'm saying that they would just keep it at 20,000 forever. Like why
Right.
would they need to make it more efficient, the process of creating this medicine, and therefore reduce the price? Why don't they just pay the
They wouldn't
politician?
need to. There would be, once the government would just stop buying it once they no longer needed the product anymore.
Well, right. That's it.
That would be their incentive
Sure.
too. So the government, it's not like an infinite expenditure. The government
Oh,
says it's going to
sure.
cost.
But I'm
It'll
saying
cost
for
us X
the
numbers.
amount of patients, for the amount of people affected by this in society, why not make every cure at $20,000?
I mean, I'm sure that they would, but that
Which
doesn't
would be
seem
a
like
gross, inefficient expenditure of money, right? Because if this is 20,000 for everybody,
only from the
you
point
can't
of
buy
view,
that thing over there.
only from the point of view of people who do not have the disease, or do not care about the people who have the disease, or think that their particular position is, or whatever their desires are more important than the disease, those that are diseased or curing a certain type of disease. I mean, it seems to me that no one would argue that if an individual has a specific disease and that they can cure them with one dose or series of dose that costs 20,000, that the government shouldn't do that. I mean, that just seems, when the alternative is to pay for the government to pay long term more money than the 20,000. I mean, it's not reasonable not to do that.
I agree. I agree
if
with
it's
that.
paying $10,000 a month for preventative, or $5,000
Right.
a month, or then no one is going to say that it's not better. So there'd be no opposition to that.
Sure. But that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm arguing against. If it made financial sense to cure everybody and just pay the 20,000, because in the long run they'll save money, absolutely they'll do that and it makes sense. But what I'm arguing is there's no reason that company won't just continue producing that medicine and even improve their production processes and continue to sell it at 20,000, because they know that the government has, according to you, a contractual obligation to, for the welfare of the people. So why would it not just always sell it at 20,000? Why be competitive and bring the price down?
I mean, well, first of all, they would refine their production method so that they can make more from each. They have guaranteed.
Oh, they'll do that, but they'll
Yes.
sell it at 20,000 though, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, they'll still sell it. So you're saying that the government will be taken advantage of. Well, the government doesn't decide that that's not. The government doesn't mind being taken advantage of if it's going to save them money in the long term. I mean, so they're already saving money.
Sure.
When you're talking about paying $20,000 per cure, that ends up saving them $50,000 a year per person.
Right.
And then you're talking about maybe they could have technically got 20,000 now, 18,000, where you're talking about $2,000. That's irrelevant to the government. They're going to still be. Yeah, so they're not going to worry about that. That's not a consideration. So the right. company itself will become more efficient because they have guaranteed purchasing from the government. The people become healthier because they're giving the cure. So the process becomes cheaper because the company wants to make more money per shot.
They won't sell it for cheaper, but they'll produce it cheaper.
Right. And so then when the government says, okay, this is no longer a problem that we're going to have to worry about, so we're going to stop buying, then that company's going to come out. They've already made the advancements that's going to make it cheaper, so they're going to be able to sell it more cheaply to the market, other markets, or if it comes back, the other insurances are going to pay less. So then it's opened up, and then you have the regular free market that we have now. So all the government does is expedites the number of people that get access to the higher quality of service, without limiting the impact that the negative impact that you're talking about.
Well, it does, right? Because again, if and you just admitted that the government wouldn't care about saving money, it doesn't really care about efficiency. So sure, they're getting this, but then they're losing that, right? They're losing the cancer research that they should have been spending the money that they would have saved if there was a competitive market, right? And there was a reason to lower that price.
No, but
you're gaining this and losing that.
No, because they're going to have more money in the long run because they're
Who
paying them
is?
more upfront. The government is, because they're going to be responsible in my system. They're already responsible for the
Right, right. I
upkeep of the
get
road.
that. But I'm
Right.
saying
So
my
then
argument is not the most.
the
No,
cancer's
sorry,
research
go
is
ahead.
still going to be funded, right? So
Not
that
to the
money
same
is,
degree. Not to the same degree.
if the government is saving money by making this purchase, they're going to have more money to fund the other research. So by
Yeah.
being able to act in mass as the government, using using the provided taxes to be able to act in mass, the government can save money in the long term, which allows for more distribution, more use, more research in the other programs without having any of the negatives that you're describing. I mean, yes, the government.
Let me. Can I jump in real quick? Sorry,
Sure,
I don't
sure,
want to cut you off.
that's
So,
okay.
so here's basically what you're saying, right? You're saying it would be cheaper for the government to buy this gear at 20,000 because in the long run they'll save money, right? If they cure this thing. So let's say that if they do that, they save 10,000. Let's say they save 10 million bucks, right? If they do it this way, it's 10 million bucks. I'm saying I agree with that, but that's not the most efficient way to do it, because if they did it more efficiently, right? If there was a market system and there's competitive pricing, rather than taxpayers paying for the government, there would be a market system. The price of this would naturally go down through competition. And rather than having $10 million of funding for cancer research, there'd be $20 million. There'd be $50 million, right? So yes, it's efficient in that sense, but it's not the most efficient use of that money, is what I'm saying. It's an argument of the most efficiency, not just efficiency.
Well, I think you're ignoring then the fact that through the government's doing it, that more people will have access to the product more quickly that would not have access it until the market worked its way down, and until it went through the market. That's a gradual process, right? So
that's assuming the government can identify that this is the thing they need to build. Again, without profit and loss, how do they know, right? I mean, there could be another pharmaceutical that says, you know what's really important? This research we're doing for toe warts, that's the most important thing. And I'll prove it to you by giving your campaign $1 million every year. So in fact, you should pay $20,000 a year for my toe wart medicine rather than that thing, right? I mean, it's just politics.
But see, I think that's you're forgetting that individuals vote in politicians. So you're going to have individuals that say this is available. Individuals are going to know, especially individuals in the case we're talking about that have HIV, are going to know that this cure is available. The government is dragging its feet or whatever. We're going to vote out the people. We're going to vote in people that this is an issue, and we're going to make it an issue. And I mean, that's how the politics works. That's how our government.
How often do people get to vote for a politician?
Every 2 years, I guess.
Okay, so basically they can lie to get elected, and then for 2 years they're safe. And as long as they get adequate kickbacks, maybe they don't care about politics after that. Maybe they want to retire, right?
That seems just a cynical, an undeserving cynical. Or
Really,
it seems like the government is undeserving of that. That they don't care about what their individual. In my experience, that the people in politics care about what their constituents care about, and they fight for that. Even if I think some of the stuff that their particular areas that they're from think are important, those people fight that. That's why you have conservative states that have conservative principles, have conservative politicians that fight for conservative ideas. If you have liberal states, have liberal politicians that fight for liberal ideas. I mean, so they don't
perfectly represent the voters, though, right? I mean, if your choice is between A and B, and you kind of prefer A, and you know B is really bad, well, all that means is people are choosing someone that kind of supports them, that doesn't really reflect all their views. And once that person gets elected, obviously, they can just kind of do whatever they want. I mean, there's so many politicians that say one thing, and then when they get elected, they don't do that thing because they know that they're safe for 4 years, 8 years, depending on the position.
I think that's true for maybe one or two topics that the individuals do that maybe their constituency is split, or maybe they have a personal, they have a personal stance on some sort of issue. But no politician goes in and goes against their constituents for every single topic that voted in. They don't say one thing during their um, they don't say 10 things during their campaign and then don't do any of those 10 things. I mean, that just is not how you stay elected. I mean, you could be
But you
right.
said
Maybe
you said they vote every 2 years. I say 4 years, 8 years, depending on the position, right? President, governor, whatever. So why wouldn't they just say one thing, get elected, and then kind of do some of the stuff they said they were going to do, but mostly not, and just get paid a lot of money?
I mean, first of all, I don't know that it's that much money, and I don't know that most people want to go in for 4 years and then not be elected again, right? They want to be reelected, and people aren't allowed. I mean, people don't make as much. I mean, it seems unlikely that they're going to be getting like enough money from kickback from. I mean, because that's not something that they're allowed to do.
They don't
right?
have to be horrible about it, right? And they don't have to. They can still lie about it, put on a good face and a good show, and at the end of the day, just be slightly better than the other candidate or be in the party that certain people prefer, right? Obviously, Democrats are never going to support a Republican. So you could be an extremely corrupt, you could be a Nancy Pelosi, and at the end of the day, people are going to vote for a Nancy Pelosi over a Pence, right? So you could be pretty damn corrupt and still get elected.
I mean, I'm not gonna argue with that. I just think that I'm a bit more optimistic that most of the people that get into politics don't have a personal agenda to screw over their constituents. I mean, I just don't think that's something that happens as often.
It's not that binary, right? It's a bit more nuanced, right?
They'll
screw them off just enough to not be hated, but obviously to get kickbacks.
All right. So in the final 3 minutes, do you want to address anything else really quick? I mean, I think taxes are good for. I think hands down, taxes are good for at least some portion of society. I think everyone can agree that taxes on everybody benefit at least those people that aren't able to pay taxes for whatever reason. So I think that's pretty clear. Sure.
Are taxes good for anything else but wealth redistribution? Do they do anything else unique or anything other than just taking one person's money and giving it to someone else?
Yeah, of course. I mean, they provide safety. They provide roads. They provide health. I mean,
I could pay for roads and I could pay for my own police, right?
I don't know that you could. I don't know that any individual. I just don't know that that's practical. I don't know. You could maybe now, but what if you got sick and you couldn't work anymore? Then you wouldn't be able to pay for the roads. You wouldn't lose access to the roads. You wouldn't lose access to the police. You wouldn't lose access to the fire department. I mean, to say it's a redistribution of wealth, it's not. I mean, taxes definitely pay for services, and we didn't talk a lot about it, but they pay for military, they pay for foreign diplomats.
I could pay for all this stuff, right? Obviously, I wouldn't pay for foreign diplomats because that's completely worthless. But I could pay for roads. I could pay for police. It doesn't seem like it does anything unique other than pay for people who can't pay. I mean,
I think that is a very critical view of it because I mean taxes are used for anytime we're negotiating. Anytime the national government negotiates with any sort of foreign government, those people are paid through taxes.
Right.
So that
and
is
it's
not
debatable if we need them, though, right?
I mean, if we're going to, we exist in the world, right? So the world,
Sure.
Other governments exist. So our government needs to interact with other governments. Those people are going to be paid through taxation. So I mean, there are many other reasons that taxes are good for society, and it is not distribution of wealth. I would say that distribution of wealth is the minimum.
So what do taxes do for me? Let's say I'm a millionaire. What would they do for me that's anything special?
They protect you. They provide you the opportunity. They allow you to.
But I could pay for my own protection. I'm a millionaire.
They allow you opportunities to invest your money overseas. They create deals that allow you to do that you would not be able to negotiate on your own.
I can't invest overseas if I was a millionaire. That wouldn't be something I could do.
You wouldn't be protected. Your investment wouldn't be protected.
I would pay for my protection. I would pay for my protection domestically and abroad. Let's say I'm a billionaire. Again, it doesn't seem like it does anything other than wealth redistribution for the poor.
So are you saying is taxation very beneficial for billionaires maybe you can make the argument that it's not beneficial for our billionaires or multimillionaires. But for everyone who's not a billionaire, is not a millionaire, say even those that are 100,000 heirs or 50,000 heirs or 75,000 heirs, it most certainly is good for them.
Well, we'll just have to